recorded. That's us recording, and I'm going to share Liat's video. So here we go. So will people let me know if they hear it?
So basically, we're going to have different biases based on what we think about older people and what we think about young people. But in the case of younger people, we often use...
Is it loud enough?
It's very low, the volume. Can't hear it.
Hold on a second to see what I can do with the volume. I'll put up the volume a bit. Yeah, hold on.
Adultism and youthism. And later on, when I talk about some of the challenges concerning the study of ageism, I would say that one of the major challenges is that nobody knows these terms. Nobody knows the term adultism and youthism. I became familiar with it only when I became interested in ageism towards younger people. I've learned that there are these terms. And this is a real challenge because if you don't have the construct in your mind, it's very difficult to understand the concept. Same actually also goes for ageism. Even though ageism exists in the English language for over 5 decades now, it is not a common term in many other languages. And when people don't have a good grasp of what the term is, they can't do anything with it. And I will talk more about that later on. Nonetheless, I think that there are many similarities between the ageism experienced by younger people and the ageism experienced by older people. And I think that this beautiful poem really illustrates that. And I will read a couple of lines. Said the little boy, sometimes I drop my spoon. Said the old man, I do that too. The little boy whispered, I wet my pants. I do that too, laughed the little old man. Said the little boy, I often cry. The old man nodded, so do I. But worst of all, said the boy, it seems grown-ups don't pay attention to me. And he felt the warmth of a wrinkled old hand. I know what you mean, said the little old man. I think that nowadays, any of the terms used here probably would be considered incorrect and ageist on their own. Nonetheless, I think that this poem does have its beauty, and I wanted to share it because I think it does show similarities in the experiences. And in this presentation, I will be talking both about similarities, but also about differences in the way ageism is manifested towards young and old people in society. So, as I said, I became interested in ageism as a gerontologist. And apparently, there is quite a lot of research on the other two big isms, on racism and sexism. Nonetheless, there is much less research concerning ageism. This is quite dated, and now there is more interest in the field concerning ageism. Nonetheless, still, we think about racism and think about sexism a lot more than we think about ageism, and we study these topics a lot more. However, and this is based on the European Social Survey, which concerns 29 countries, when we ask people about their experiences of ageism, sexism, and racism, the majority, a third of the sample, reported ageism. Nonetheless, only 17% reported racism, which is, I think, what we usually have in mind when we think about isms. So ageism is more prevalent than the other two big isms, but we study it a lot less. Interestingly enough, in that particular study and in many other studies, large-scale studies that ask people about their experiences, we found that actually it was the younger people that reported more exposure to ageism than older people. I see someone nodding his head, and I'm wondering why you think it is like that it is the younger people who report ageism more than older people. Can you have a wise guess or try to guess? You're on mute.
Yeah. I think restrictions, about restrictions of doing things, but actually because there's an adultism is prevalent, and so older generations stop younger people from doing things, think they're inexperienced, etc., etc.
Yeah. So this is one reason why younger people report more ageism than older people. It could be that actually they are experiencing more ageism than older people. Alternatively, it is younger people who are more alert to or more tuned in to experiences of ageism, whereas older people tend to accept ageism for granted and not to complain about it, not to state that they're experiencing ageism. So it can be either way. When we look at other studies, this one was conducted by the World Health Organization based on the World Values Survey. What they find again is that ageism is very prevalent in society. 1 in 2 people say that older people are not respected. And actually, people are more likely to report lack of respect in higher income countries compared to lower income countries, which is a little bit surprising. And there is also a systematic review, which was conducted to examine cross-cultural differences in ageism. And this review as well has shown that actually ageism is more, the reviews showed the other way around, that ageism is more prevalent in more traditional societies. Does anyone want to guess why this might be the case, or should I try to? Well, I think that one guess is that people in more modern societies, they know what to answer. It's not polite, it's not nice to be ageist. So in more modern societies, people might be hiding ageism, but it's really unclear. Ageism is prevalent in a variety of settings, and I will go over a couple of them and try to demonstrate how prevalent it is both towards older people and towards younger people. I do have a caveat that there is a lot more research on ageism towards older people. So many of the examples that I will give are with regard to ageism towards older people. And one way to look at it is really the way we talk about older people in policy documents. And these terms are actually quite disturbing. There are different policy documents that talk about aging as a tsunami. So they really accurate the changing demographics with something really bad. There is the term dependency ratio that talks about the number of older people versus the rest of society. And this term is used in many policy documents, and it immediately assumes that over a certain age, people are dependent. The term premature death is actually a term that is used by the World Health Organization to define death that occurs under the age of 70, which means that over that age, it is not premature anymore to die. This obviously is a big problem and demonstrates ageism in policy documents. With regard to younger people, if we look here at these newspapers, magazines, we see that there are terms that are being used on the cover of these magazines: the me generation, the self-entitled generations. These terms are, I think, illustrative of the negative connotation that comes with young age as well. And as I said, younger people are more likely to report exposure to age-based discrimination, especially in the workforce. I'm going to show you this and we will talk about it afterwards.
Hallo, ich bin Nico Semsrott und das ist ein Letztwähler. Dieser alte weiße Mann ist so gut wie tot, aber immer noch wahlberechtigt. Wie fast 5 Millionen andere Letztwähler in Deutschland entscheidet er über eine Zukunft, die er selbst nicht mehr erleben wird.
Schauen Sie mal hier, die SPD.
Wunderbar, danke.
Mit einem Durchschnittsalter von 44 ist Europa das Altenheim der Welt. Jeder dritte Wahlberechtigte in Deutschland ist über 60.
Die sollen lieber zur Schule gehen und nicht auf der Straße rumlungern.
Ab ins Gefängnis mit denen!
Viele dieser Menschen sind für die Abschottung Europas, sexistische Rollenbilder und veraltete Werte oder kurz für das Wahlprogramm der CDU. Herr Hansen hat gerade gewählt. Die Konsequenzen tragen junge, dynamische Menschen wie wir. Darum fordern wir von der Partei Die Partei die Einführung des Höchstwahlalters. Wenn die Menschen in den ersten 18 Lebensjahren nicht wählen dürfen, sollten sie auch in den letzten 18 Lebensjahren nicht wählen. Darum wählt bis zum 26. Mai die Partei, solange es noch geht.
So this clip is actually, yeah, I know. It was produced by a political party in Germany called Die Partei, and they have or had 2 seats in the European Parliament. So it's a real party, political party, and this is supposed to be satirical. When I first saw it, I was shocked, and I asked them, one of my colleagues, I showed it to one of my colleagues, German colleagues, who wrote them a very, very long German letter. And I was sure that this video will be erased from YouTube, but it's still there. In essence, I think this video is extremely ageist towards older people, obviously, but it also shows some of the resentments that younger people may feel because they might feel that they are deprived of their voice. One area where we see that, I think, the most is in the area of climate change and climate discourse. And I think that the entire discourse around climate change can demonstrate intergenerational tension. Older people are being blamed for not doing enough or not having done enough, and also for having a carbon footprint that is quite substantial. Younger people are likely to experience the consequences of climate change for years to come, way after things that happened, or way after actions or inactions were taken. Nonetheless, it is older people who are most susceptible to climate change, and younger people are often deprived of their voice, as you saw in the other clip as well, and do not have the political power to really influence the climate discourse. So I think this is an area that does show quite a lot of intergenerational tension, where both parties actually are quite susceptible to the effects of climate change. And older people as well do not have the power to influence them, or do not have there is not enough attention to the impact of climate change on older people. Most of the climate change policy measures do not address older people. And only recently, the WHO has produced a report concerning the importance of healthy climate for healthy aging and healthy longevity. However, climate change was not part of the UN decade of healthy aging up until now. So only now it is starting to be noticed that it's really important to acknowledge climate change with regard to older people. And even though younger people have been quite vocal about climate change, there are plenty of incidents where older people have shown acts of intergenerational solidarity to support the climate change movement. So I think this is an important area because it really shows how we have scarce resources, and both sides are quite susceptible to the effects of climate change for different reasons. One explanation for why ageism occurs both towards younger people and towards older people is the fact that our entire life is divided by chronological age. We go to school and study in kindergarten with people our own age. We work and raise a family, again, with people more or less of our own age. And then we're expected to retire, again, be around people of our own age. When our entire life cycle is divided by chronological age, we have very few opportunities to interact with people of different age groups. And this results in tension between the generations because it's us versus them. One area where we see this chronological division is actually the outside environment. And this is based on a study that we conducted that visually documented the behaviors of older people and younger people in the environment. And what we saw was that older people, when they came to this to the environment, and we simply took photos of the entire setting for a couple of hours each day and counted who is in the photo and what these people do. What we found was that when older people came to this setting, they were grouping together, not necessarily in interaction, but they came over and stayed there, possibly to have some social exploration, whereas younger people were on the go most of the time. The only times that we saw the interaction between young and old in these particular settings, which is just the outside environment, was when younger people served as caretakers of older people. So we didn't see much interaction in these squares where we took those photos and studied the behavior of older people and younger people. Indeed, when research asked younger people, for instance, about their interaction with people of different age groups, they report a preference towards same age groups. And younger people also feel as if they're being patronized, just like Dave was saying earlier, in interpersonal relationships with older people. In a recent study that we conducted, we found that adults over the age of 50 who had younger social network members, people who are 10 years and over younger than them, and had better self-perceptions of their own aging 3 years later. In addition, those self-perceptions of one's aging, how one perceives themselves, better self-perceptions of aging predicts a larger number of both younger and older kin and non-kin relationships. So it is really impactful. The way we think about our aging affects our associations with people of different age groups. And if we're concerned about our aging, if we think negatively about our aging, we are less likely to interact with people of different age groups. I'm moving now to a different area, to the healthcare system. And actually there is not much research with regard to the healthcare system and younger people. There is a lot of research concerning discrimination towards older people. And this book was written by philosophers, but they would simply ask if there is a duty to die. Do older people have to die because they consume too much of the healthcare resources? So these are philosophers, and they allow themselves to ask this question explicitly. Many times it is not asked explicitly, but it is actually practiced implicitly. During the pandemic, we have seen the practice also explicitly. I decided to avoid talking about the pandemic because I've had enough of the pandemic, but I'm sure that you've all seen that in various countries and various examples. We also see ageism in the development of different drugs, including, by the way, the COVID-19 vaccine that was tried on younger generations. Same goes for drugs that even address Alzheimer's, which is certainly a condition of old age, yet the studies were restricted to younger age groups. Same goes with heart conditions, diabetes, and so forth. It is a lot easier to study these groups, but it is discriminatory, especially because older people are the ones who actually need a treatment. We do learn a little bit about ageism towards younger people through comparisons between older and younger people. And this is one study that looked at case vignettes, where we presented to physicians the exact same case, and the only difference was the age of the patient. Once it was a younger patient, the other time it was an older patient. Both cases, there was a complaint about sexual difficulties with one partner, but not with the other. So in a way, if the person is performing with some, it means that it is probably a psychosocial problem rather than a physiological problem. Nonetheless, the physicians were more likely to attribute the erectile dysfunction to the older patient and performance anxiety to the younger patients. They also attributed a better prognosis to the younger patient. To the older patient, they were more likely to prescribe Viagra, and the younger patient was more likely to be offered sexual therapy. So this really shows differential treatment. A different study with social worker, again, just the same mechanisms. presenting once a 37-year-old woman, next a 77-year-old woman. In both cases, the exact same vignette was described to the social workers. In both cases, it was a woman that was living in a very troubling situation where she experienced intimate partner violence. Nonetheless, the social workers were more likely to say that it was the younger woman who experienced the violence more so than the older woman, but they were more likely to choose to take care and provide social support to the younger woman. And the older woman, they were more likely to refer her for legal intervention, so to refer her out, even though they said that it was the younger woman who was experiencing more violence. So these are cases of ageism towards both young and old. Nonetheless, the discrimination was primarily evident, I think, with regard to older people. And there is a recent study that looked at the cost of ageism, but this is only with regard to older people. And the cost is quite substantial. It stands at $63 billion a year in the US healthcare system alone. And this is based on discrimination aimed at older people, negative age stereotypes, how people think of their own aging, and negative self-perceptions of aging, and how these variables affect the 8 most prominent health conditions. So it's very substantial, actually, the financial effect of ageism towards older people. In the workforce, as I said, it is younger people who complain more. And actually, ageism can start quite early. If we're looking at the high-tech industry, for instance, it would start at 40. However, it can start also at 20, when you're told that you're inexperienced, when you're asked to do internship without payment. So these are incidents of ageism as well. However, in the case of older people, this is not so much the case in the UK anymore, I think. And in Scotland, I don't think that you have mandatory retirement age anymore. But in Israel, for instance, we have mandatory retirement age that expects older people to retire and give their experiences, skills, and education for free, simply because they have reached a certain age. And I think this corresponds with another form of ageism, which expects older people to move away and not to consume too much of the resources of society. So once older people reach a certain age, we expect them to step aside so that the younger generations will have the right of way, but we don't want them to consume too much and eat too much of the pension system, because then there will be nothing left for younger people. So it's a really lose-lose situation in that case. We also see ageism, and this is ageism towards older people mainly, in the art scene. And there are many, many advertisements for prizes and awards that are restricted based on age, and there is this expectation that creativity is something that is age dependent. Nonetheless, there are obviously many very famous artists who have started their work only in very late age, and creativity does not stop at a certain age. But the thought of creativity as having an age is quite common in the art world. When we look at the media, we often see an intersection between ageism and sexism, and this is what we see actually in front of the screen. So women have to stay young as much as possible, as long as possible, and after that they become irrelevant, whereas men are allowed to age gracefully and continue to capture positions or roles as protagonists, even in old age. Nonetheless, I do have to say that recently we conducted a study where we interviewed very famous film directors in the second half of their life. And what we found was that they actually report the experience of ageism quite extensively. And there is actually quite a lot of work conducted by Michael North and other researchers who have shown that in old age, men in the workforce are seen as more threatening than women. So older women are allowed to still capture positions in the workforce, whereas older men are expected to move away because they are the ones who have had all the power. And this is what the directors that we interviewed reported to us. So even though film directing is a very masculine job, and they have had a lot of power as young directors, once they've reached middle age, they have become irrelevant to their industry. And they also reported a lot of self-ageism. It is not a coincidence that we experience so much ageism and self-ageism. Had I asked you to think of a witch, it probably would be an older witch. Same goes if we go to all the old stories about Snow White and all other fairy tales. There was always an evil lady there, and she was old and she was worried about her looks. And this really penetrates our mindset. And when we ask young people, for instance, children, to paint a younger person versus an older person, we see a difference. Even at third grade or fifth grade, they already distinguish between the young and happy and the old and sad. And these paintings illustrate the messages that we receive from the media, that we receive from literature, that we receive from our environment, and they really penetrate our mindset at a very young age. The problem is that older people as well internalize these messages and think of themselves as slow, useless, a burden to society. And these messages actually affect the way people age. And there is plenty of research conducted by Becca Levy and other researchers that has shown that when people think negatively about their own aging, they're more likely to be sick, they're more likely to fall, their cognitive functioning is likely to deteriorate, and they're even likely to die 7.5 years before those who think positively about their aging. So it really is important, the messages that we are receiving from society, because they impact the way we think about ourselves, about our own aging. And again, I will go back to the pandemic and just briefly say that during the pandemic, the messages that older people received were that they are vulnerable and that they are a burden to society. And to live with these messages is going to impact the aging process of each and every one of us, because we're all going to age eventually, and it's going to impact our aging process. So to conclude, I hope that I convinced you that we have to fight ageism and do something. Nonetheless, we have a couple of challenges. And the first one really concerns the definition of what ageism is, let alone what adultism or youthism is. People are not aware of these concepts. Maybe in English, people know the term ageism. I doubt they know the term adultism or youthism. They definitely don't know the term ageism in many other languages. And this is important, and I'm going to give her an example. A study that we conducted has found that when people were asked whether or not they experienced ageism without defining what ageism was, the majority of people said, no, we did not experience ageism. Nonetheless, after going back to the same people and defining what ageism was, a much larger percentage of people actually admitted to experiencing ageism. So people need to have the term in their mind to be able to say something is wrong here. I'm experiencing discrimination. These are stereotypes, that's prejudice. We need a term, and we need it in many different languages. I can talk about myself and say that also for me, even though I'm a gerontologist, I became familiar with the term ageism in Hebrew only about 12 or 10 years ago. And only then did I become interested in this as a research topic, as a policy topic, as an important topic that I can talk about. I needed the term in my own mother tongue to be able to grasp its importance. So I think this is one challenge that we're all facing. Another challenge concerns the assessment of ageism. We recently conducted a large scoping review, a systematic review, where we try to identify measures of ageism. These measures are needed because if we're trying to influence society, we want to make sure that we're influencing society in the right direction. We haven't really found a good measure that has good psychometric properties. Moreover, none of the measures that we looked at addressed ageism towards younger people. So this is really a neglected area. And we have to study both ageism towards older people and towards younger people. It's impossible to do that without a good scale. Another challenge concerns the fact that it's actually very challenging to think of ageism or age inequality at the global level. There are many measures of gender inequality. For instance, if you go to the parliament, you would expect half women, half men. Otherwise, you would say this is gender inequality. When we go to age inequality, we don't have the same definition. So we still do not have standards of what we expect to be age equality in society. And I think that it requires a lot of thinking on the part of policy stakeholders, on the part of researchers, to really understand what age inequality means at the macro level, at the national context, for instance. I don't think we are there yet, and there aren't very good measures of age inequality at this point. Another challenge concerns the way we campaign with regard to ageism, and I'm going to give you one example here.
Tu passes, quand tu passes ta main sur mes 20 ans, tes baisers que rien ne remplace, rien ne remplace ta main. J'oublie le temps, pourtant on sait que le temps passe sur les vieux amants, que bien souvent l'hiver les glace.
You didn't see the pictures, right? Just a second. Okay, so now you did see the picture. And basically this was from Finland. This is an advertisement in Finland that tried to preach to an anti-ageism campaign. This one is from Israel, and it says the exact same thing. Do not throw me away when I'm old. And this is a very common term in Hebrew. So I think that we all agree that these are not good ways to campaign for an anti-ageism campaign. However, we recently studied 3 campaigns that were launched in Israel during the pandemic. And the 3 campaigns had in common the fact that they all tried to emphasize actually positive aspects of aging. And we conclude that this is problematic as well. So you don't want to show people being thrown away to the garbage, of course. This is not a good way to increase awareness, but you also don't want to show only active, healthy, working older people as a campaign, because we know that in old age, there is variability, and we have to account for that. If we show only the positive side or only the negative side, we're still creating a stereotype. So either way, it's problematic. And I can say that the WHO report actually concludes that there is not enough evidence to show the effectiveness of anti-ageism campaigns. And this could be one reason for that. that they don't have the rationale of really showing heterogeneity that is associated with old age. We do know, however, that interventions that address ageism work, both education about ageism, and this is why I was so happy that Bella had approached me and asked me to come over and talk, because I always talk about that. So education works, and also intergenerational contact works, because it breaks the stereotypes. Nonetheless, it needs to occur under certain conditions. We don't want one generation to be on top of the other and to know all and patronize the other generation. We want to engage both generations in collaborative tasks and work so that they can benefit from the intergenerational contact. I have this here to say that age is just a number. Again, I would say that the pandemic has shown over and over that policymakers are using age as much more than a number, as a cutoff for certain policies. And this is extremely problematic, because we know that actually there is a lot of variability that comes in old age. And actually there is more variability in old age than in any other age group in society. So the environment matters more as we reach old age. And this is why age is both a biological construct, but also a social construct, and we have to take it into account. I think that it's obvious that the way we talk about both old and young people in society makes a difference, and we have to be aware of that. And oftentimes we don't even stop to question it, because we internalize ageism at so many different levels towards both young and older people in society. Laws and regulations should explicitly prohibit age discrimination. I can say that currently age discrimination is the only legal discrimination which is still allowed by the European Court of Justice, for instance. So we still have a lot to do in that regard. I suggest to start looking at aging as an opportunity, because it does provide people with the first, second, third chance in life. People in old age might have more time, wisdom, experience, money, opportunities to repair relationships, and to exchange with younger and older generations, as well as come to terms with things that had happened or not throughout their lives. I really like this poem, which talks about how old age can be liberating. And it was written by Jenny Joseph when she was 29, I believe. And she does not like red hats, or red or purple, but it has inspired actually women in many English-speaking countries to celebrate their second half of life and to really free themselves from the constraints and norms put on by society. I think that aging is an opportunity also to society at large. It does provide an opportunity for employment and productivity. There is exchange of both quantified and non-quantified, such as babysitting tasks that older people can engage in. And it provides an opportunity for intergenerational solidarity. I have not talked about young age as an opportunity, because I think that we all accept it. We all see youth and children as an opportunity for our society. I don't need to talk about it. I think that we have to remind ourselves that it's not only the early periods of life that provide opportunities, but it's also the second part of life that provides opportunities. There is really limited research on discrimination, on ageism towards younger people. We don't know enough about that. And as I was saying, a lot of what we know about younger people comes from research that compared older to younger people. So it's not enough. There is no conceptual framework to understand ageism towards younger people. I'm going to conclude here with the WHO campaign that started in 2016 and had a vision of a world for all ages with the goal of changing the way we feel, think, and act towards age and aging. I can say that when the campaign started, when the design for the campaign started, it was very clear from the get-go that they have to bring some people from young youth organizations to advocate for the youth, but the mandate that they received was for ageism towards older people. Nonetheless, over time, the report that they actually launched exactly last year, addressed both ageism towards older people and towards younger people, because it became clear that ageism is not only something that affects older people, even though we still do have a lot more evidence about ageism towards older people, it also affects younger people. And therefore, the report addresses both older and younger people, and all the educational activities that they're doing actually try to target both younger and older people, with the understanding that in order for all of us to live in a world for all ages, we cannot talk only about discrimination that affects one group and ignore discrimination that affects the other one. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions now.
Okay, that was the end of the video from Liat Ayalon, and I just thought it was a good one to show because it covers so much, and she is happy to come to our network from time to time because she is working hard in research to try and change policy. And I just thought it was a good place to start today. It was a long time, so let's all go and have a 5-minute break. And sorry that Katie had to go, hope she's okay, but let's go and get a 5-minute break and a bit of a rest. There was a lot to take in. You'll get a copy of this anyway, and it might be useful for certain parts of things that you're working on yourselves. But we'll have 5 minutes and come back. So what time is that? That's, wait, I'll check what time it is. I'm not really, 14:50. So say come back at 5 too. Is that okay?
Cool.
Get a little rest. That's it. So welcome back after our break. Now, really, I just quite like you guys to open it up for some discussion. But what I've done is I've put something together to look at intergenerational practice around ageism when we're working in our own networks, when we're working, whoever we're working with. And I'm going to send that out to you afterwards too, because it gives you a little bit of a kind of idea of how we could be doing that in a more constructive way, and not insulting people's own knowledge and abilities. And what I've been reading was that actually half the time people don't get time to give their own stories, and often say things like, you know, ageism, no, I'm not ageist, and it's, or no, ageism, it hasn't happened towards me. But if they're given half the chance to open up about their own lives, they then start to actually realise, oh yeah, that has happened to me. Or, oh, I didn't think of it like that before, because it's so ingrained in what our life as it is. And as Liat quite clearly says, often it's explicit and we can see it clearly, but often it's so, you know, like you're talking about nursery rhymes here, or Cinderella or Snow White. So everything that we are doing from an early age in our society is in one way or another a form of ageism. And she also mentioned the fact that actually out of the isms, sexism and racism, ageism is the one, even although we have like, you know, in our institutions and policy making, we have laws that are set up to protect people. Ageism is one that hasn't really been, you know, it's just kind of, okay, it's okay, as if it's some little thing, and it's huge. So I'd just like to probably open up the discussion to what people's thoughts are on the way forward with the people they work with. If anyone would like to speak. And if no one wants to speak, Louisa, okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got a wee story about it is ageist, but you may think it's one of these questions that you get at trainings, is it or isn't it? So what it was, I had a request, I work in as a development worker with the church, and someone had made the request to me, could you get a chair with arms on it, because one of the customers in the cafe found it hard getting up and down. They needed that rest to get up and down. So I took it back to the committee and I says, we need to get some more chairs. More people are finding it difficult getting up and down. Can we get them? And they says, now this is from people who are 70, 72 who are on the committee. And they says, really? At their age, they should have been moving a lot more and they wouldn't get so stiff sitting so long in the cafe. It's their own fault, sort of thing. And so I was just mortified. And years ago, I had an illness that I had mobility difficulties and I wouldn't have been able to get up and down without pushing on something. And I turned around and I says, actually, the request was for a member, a customer who's 101. I says, can we not just be a wee bit gracious? So was I being ageist or not by mentioning the person's name?
I don't think so, Louisa. I think that you're being considerate and compassionate about what that person needed. And like you say, some people can have illnesses that affect their ability to stand up unaided at any age. So it's about what that person needs and not about their age. So I think, yeah, you mentioned their age, but it was just maybe to bring it down a bit. You know, it's just about, this is the person and this is what they need. So let's just do it. I don't think that was being ageist.
I actually think that it was probably the committee that were being more ageist than yourself.
Because they're physically mobile.
Yes, of course. And there's a lot of young people who have disabilities who find it very difficult to get out of chairs. So I really think we should be providing that support for them.
So the next question is, how do I get that across? Because although I say it to them, we shouldn't be thinking like this because it is ageist. How do I get that message across when they've got closed ears?
Oh yeah, it's a sensitive one, isn't it?
Maybe do a survey or something with your congregation, or open it up for discussion.
Or host an awareness raising session,
yeah,
which is, and I've got some info here, so that would be ideal to kind of host a session on unconscious prejudice. Mm-hmm. You know, so that actually people, half the time they're not aware, and they would be horrified to think that they had offended anyone. And that's the other side of it, isn't it? It's not meant, and it used to be, I'm not a racist, but. So I would probably say I'm not ageist, but. So there's that going on as well. So they won't even have meant it, probably. I'm not sure. Any other thoughts on that one? It's a good example.
As Silene here, as the oldest person in this grouping today, and I'm absolutely sure I am, and Bella, I think, would contradict me if I wasn't. It's almost, when I was in my 70s, there was a banner and a group that I would never, that I was part of long before COVID, and it was almost to prove how fit, and oh, why would I need a chair with elbows? It was almost an educational and non-functioning thing. Having been through the mill over the last 11 years, as many of us all have come to it with different aspects. Again, I think intergenerational working at all levels is really, really needed. But again, the comment from your church group, I actually find that really quite sad.
Yeah. It's a way of summing it up actually about the sadness about the inability to actually be emphatic towards whatever the situation is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I used to find myself when I was younger saying, oh, I wouldn't do that. And I think, why did you do that? And as I realised, that was in my 20s, right? I didn't, why did you do that? But now I go, oh yes, oh, is that what you've chosen to do? That's good. Because I realised, you know, I'm not a solid entity that has power over what everyone else does or says. I think, I don't know what you all think, but I think that if you look at kind of people feeling belittled or feeling ignored, that'd be a good place to start. So that whole feeling of, oh, well, what I would say isn't important, or no one ever really listens to me, kind of thing. And I don't know, I mean, as a mother and a grandmother and a great grandmother of a big family, right? Quite often I'm kind of ignored. It's like, oh, there's my mum and whatever. And, you know, as I get older, I'm like, am I going to be that older lady in the corner who nobody's really talking to? But like Eileen, I took up swimming and paddleboarding and I went surfing, and my kids were like, at your age? And now they're like, well, my mum does such and such. So it totally changed their whole concept of what life can be. And I think that in itself, what Liat Ayalon talks about, there's a good TED talk from her that I'll send you a link to, where she talks about her older father. And I really liked it because she has talked about the fact that about retirement being a certain age in Israel. But her father just continued to do his business because it was his own business. And he didn't retire. He just didn't retire. So she talks a bit about that and the pressures of other people who, you know, it's like, when are you retiring? What if people don't want to? What if they want to continue? Or I don't know. So I suppose we're working with our older and younger people. This, I think, these platforms here, and I'm hoping the next time we meet in September, we'll have more info. I've got some stuff put together for meeting with groups and some ideas that might spark conversations to get people to speak and perhaps kind of explore what ageism is. Because I know that Julie's here from Age Scotland, so on that level, the amount of work that Age Scotland has done in ageism is fantastic, and the research that they've done is really good. It's
we have sort of workplace workshops as well, as you were mentioning there, about ageism, and encouraging organisations to really look at it as an area within the workplace. And as you say, there isn't a retirement age now, so people can continue to work for as long as they like. And so it's important that people, when they get older, aren't excluded and still continue to be treated as just the same way that any other employee is treated as well. So yeah, we have sort of work around that as well for organisations.
It's quite a hard one, and lifelong learning is another area too, where I was an older student when I went back, and I think that many people were even older than I was at the time, and it is more difficult for mature students because it is, you know, the fraternity, so to speak, of the university is a lot of younger people, and older students generally kind of all go together. But I ended up being friends with two younger men, and they were much younger than me. But what happened was that, you know, as far as our work was concerned, we were on par and we had an intellectual understanding. And I think that that can happen a lot with projects that I've seen anyway, where maybe it's been gardening or whatever it happens to have been. There's been a younger and older person who've connected because they have this shared experience, and often they're learning from each other. And Eileen will agree with this. It's like, it's dead important that things aren't done at people. So I think Catherine was talking yesterday about befriending project that she manages and she works with. And it's all about the people who are part of that. It's not about anyone saying, oh, this is what you should do. It's about saying to them, what would you like to do? So with the ageism thing, I just thought that it might be a little add-on for people working with groups of people to take something and actually start talking about ageism in a very kind of quite a nice way, in a slow way, not going, oh, do you know ageism, but actually talking to them and asking them to share their own stories. And we had some really good questions last time, which I've got here, ideas for topics, right? So we had some, because it's difficult to detect ageism, because it is, we had some really nice questions about, do you think you should tell people your age? Or does age affect the way you think and feel about your body? There's all these things, you know, and I kind of like some of the stuff that Liat told us is quite shocking. I mean, you know, the fact that stuff like that's online that you can see, and also some of the information about sex, for example, and you know, the treatment of a person according to their age, that was quite shocking. That, you know, someone wouldn't be given the same consideration, but was actually, it was almost assumed by the medical professional, well, they won't need that, they'll need this.
Yeah.
That's shocking. So there's but what I would say is, it isn't just a little twee thing that, oh, let's talk about ageism. It's huge. And I hope that their whole intergenerational aspect will join with others, obviously Age Scotland and others across different partnerships. SOPA's here, Eileen's here from SOPA, and you know, from Vol Action or whenever, to just actually say, let's look at this. And as Louisa quite rightly said about the incidents in the church, there's probably lots of other areas that people have come across. The last session we had a lot of stuff about plastic surgery and self-image, and a lot of people talking about, one girl was in her 40s and her daughter had told her that she shouldn't wear that shade of lipstick, she was too old to wear it. She was only 40, you know, so it was a whole thing there, but it was all about, and then it moved on to concern, which I thought was really kind of what we always do. We're always concerned about the younger generation, and there was concern about young people and Botox, and it was always image conscious thing. So exploring older people like Lauren Bacall, who didn't get any work done, for example, who is the most beautiful woman. I wish I had a picture right now, with lots and lots of lines and wrinkles and beautiful piercing eyes. So I think what Lauren decided was, actually, I'm not getting any work done. I'm just going to be me. And if we could have more ambassadors like that for old age, we can start to view our society not like the witch that Liat showed us, you know, because it's so true, isn't it? If you see an older person and you haven't spoken to them, sometimes they might look dour, you know, until we speak. And I don't know if anyone saw Blade Runner. Has anyone seen Blade Runner, the film? Yeah. So at the very end of Blade Runner, they see Peter Ustinov, and he's a really old man, and they've never seen a really old man before, and they're all like this, and he's got cats. So it kind of, when I was young, I saw Blade Runner and I thought, well, how would that ever happen? But in actual fact, that's a really good example of the alienation and the invisible barrier that is between young and older people. You know, but it's just a thought.
I thought it was really interesting in the video, and there was an image of an older lady and she was holding her sign up, age is just a number, 70. Now, when I saw that, I thought, she's an extremely attractive lady, but likely to be older than 70. Because 70 now, I think, and this might sound really peculiar, but I think 70 is younger now than it was maybe 20 years ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So so I think images where the age isn't factual don't help. I thought that lady looked amazing, but let's celebrate actually that she was maybe 85 or 90 and looks amazing, instead of trying to portray her as 70. And here with the comms team, when we put in images together, advertising, volunteering opportunities or whatnot, we're really trying to be mindful of. So one of my colleagues was putting together a poster for befriending opportunity, and it was an old man with a stick and a younger man. I was like, can we just make that less stereotypical? Let's try and make it a bit more diverse, and you can show different ages without going to extremes. And she did it, and she did a really good job of it. And I think that that subtle way that we change, and I've had a phone call this morning with somebody who's been referred for social activities, and one of my colleagues said, what age was the lady? And I said, I don't know, I didn't ask, because she actually just wants some social activities. So I understand from the conversation what she's interested in and what her challenges are, so I can direct to the right social activities. I don't really need to know what age she is. It's quite irrelevant to me. I think changing the way that we're having conversations and the way then that we're showing images of people is really important, really important.
I think that's so true. And a really good example of it is the women's movement. So the women's movement, at one point, before it was the women's movement, there was little limited rights for women. And I mean, we know about the marriage bar where women weren't allowed to have employment. So basically, a lot of school teachers were spinsters. That was the name that was given to them, because they couldn't get employment if they got married. And I think the women's movement's a good example of how they paved the way for more progressive views for in the workplace, gender and equality for women. And the same could be true of the whole ageism agenda. It's driven, but then we need to join up, and how do we change our brainwashing of a lifetime? And it is that, isn't it, really? We're kind of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
The negativity in that video, when the word burden came up, now SOAP have got a strap line, we're a bonus, not a burden. But the fact that that burden came up, that's a negative from the beginning. And when I saw that, and I thought, right. So if you put a negative in there first, the concept is there. Whereas the strapline is, we are a bonus, not a burden. And it just turns it completely on its head. It's a positive kind of thing. And the brain, your activity within that definitely changes. Right, I am worthwhile. Do you know what I mean? Because a negative thought is a negative thought. To me, 80 odd or whatever it is. But I don't feel that. But you see that word burden, particularly during the pandemic. And I know that kids have had a horrendous time with schooling and everything else. But again, we are a bonus, we're still here, we can give. The fact of volunteering completely was cut from the scale. It shows how important today things that usually should be up and running still aren't, because of COVID and because many of us succumbed to it, or other things that weren't looked at. And again, they're now we are now desperate to give, to be a bonus, not a burden. And I think that's important. Positivity, not negativity.
Yeah, and Bella, I think it was from GWT that I got a link to the Centre for Ageing for their sort of free age positive images, and you're probably all aware of that anyway, who's here today. But just if anyone isn't aware of that, I'm sure you shared that again, but they've got some great sort of images of ageing as well that are free to use.
Yeah, that's really good. They're really good as well to use them. So Claire, you might find that useful. I'm finishing off putting something together for some ideas of bringing groups together. And what I'm kind of suggesting is that, you meet separately with your group, and maybe just do this as a gradual part of something that you're working on over a period of time. And then at some point, maybe look at bringing them together with a group of another generation, and probably, again, taking your time. Because it can't get pushed into people. It has to be something that grows along with people, and they get to know each other. And then through time, activism, dare I say, activism of some description, as in, challenging, not so much like just sort of saying to the local council or local policymakers, actually, we've been looking at this and we've been thinking this. whatever it happens to be that they come up with. There'd be nothing worse than us being prescriptive to people we work with and telling them what to do. It's local issues for local people. And the thing about the ageism is it seems like an individual personal issue, but it's actually a political issue. It's a public issue. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with sociological stuff, but C. Wright Mills, a very, very old studies that talks about, I mean, smoking's a personal thing that people do, but it becomes a public health issue. You know, so ageism's a thing that people do, and it becomes a public health issue too. And it's so important. And Liat gave the figures, 7.5 years, you die 7.5 years earlier as a result of ageism and actually kind of giving up because you think that your ability's gone or something. So, but anyway, I don't want to preach. I just thought I'd send you this when it's ready. And Julie, thankfully, that's really good with this, the media guide. And also I'll send the stuff on the images. We'll have another meeting in September, which Dwight Zay from Strathclyde University is coming along to talk about some work he's been involved in. And really that's all. I mean, the future session networks will be online. So people can come to the Ageism one 3 times a year. And when I'm out locally in our local communities doing our own local networks, we'll kind of give people a flavour of different things. And it gives people more ideas to the fact that intergenerational practice is not just something sweet that people do, but it can make a real difference in communities, along with, you know, bringing older and younger people together. And I suppose one of my favourite examples is Helensburgh, where a group of younger people who were police cadets came together with an older people's group a couple of years ago, and the two of them went out around the community and took photographs of cracks in pavements. They submitted something to the local council together, and then they continued to meet each other once a month, and they did some kind of technology thing together. But the thing is, they worked together in local issue. And it wasn't just affecting older people, the cracks in the pavements, it was affecting everyone. So there's good news like that all across Scotland. So hopefully, you know, we'll see this prosper and grow through time. Does anyone, Pam, good to see you here, because I knew you were coming a bit later and maybe your camera's not working. But does anyone else have anything to add? Because what we'll probably do is finish up and I'll send you the evaluation. Please fill in the evaluation because we need it to kind of show what took place and see what people think. Hi, Pam. Good to see you. We have a recording, so if you missed a good bit, we can get it over to you anyway. I thought you were going to... Oh,
I don't know what you were talking about in the first hour, so I can't really comment.
It was a video.
What was it?
It was a video presentation, and it was from Professor Liat Ayalon from Israel's Iban University, and it was on ageism. It's a really interesting presentation, and I think you'll enjoy it, so I'll send it over to you to watch.
Oh yes, please send it on so I can watch it, because I'm getting old.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is what they say, is Heraclitus flux. I read this and it said that every day you think that you're not any different, but every day you have aged. So every day, even doing the same thing, you have changed. I was like, oh, okay. And it's such a true thing. So, but we'll all grow old together. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you, everyone. And I hope that, you know, that you come back at some point to some of the networks and take part. And please get in touch if you have stories to share and come along. Claire, I'm in Inverclyde next Tuesday for the Greater Renfrewshire Network, but I'll be in Johnston in September. So the hub there, so that's for Johnston. And there's no one here from Ayrshire. Pam, I'm in Ayrshire on the following week. Yeah. So I've started to get out, and I've got to say that 20 people have signed up for Lanarkshire, Inverclyde's 18 organisations have signed up, so people are coming out.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good news, and it's good for people. It's just still strange times at the moment, isn't it? So thank you, and if no one has anything else to say, we'll just close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bella, as always. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bella.
Thank you. Louisa, can you stay? And Eileen, can you stay for a minute as well?
Yes, certainly. No problem.
Oh, right, okay. And anyone else who wants to stay can stay as well. But Eileen, it's good to see you, and I know that you have been, you know, had a lot going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And you look good.
We do. Walking's not my best. You know, I'm happiest in the pool. However, we've just got to put up with this at the moment, and